This is a series all about getting a male's perspective. I've got a really great friend who's going to talk with us about some things he's learned on his journey, and especially as it relates to being a girl dad. It's time. Yep. This is the Intensified Life TV with Dr. Lakeisha B. The Dr. Courtney Walker is, well, he's just a good friend. And I'll get into all of his accolades and all of that. But I really want to talk about what it means from his perspective to be the father of girls and how do you raise them. He's a married man who has a son, but he also has three girls. And then there's some other stuff that we'll talk about. So
Yeah.
I want to go back into your history because we're going to come up a little bit. You were raised primarily by your grandmother, right?
Right. Well, my grandmother and my grandfather, my mother had me in college. She went to Arkansas State University, and she was a sophomore junior year, and she has a son in 1975. And my grandparents said, hey, you know what, we'll keep the boy here as you finish school. And she was 2 hours away and was always back at home. But I was with my grandmother and grandfather until he passed away when I was 8 years old. And so, and then I was exclusively with my grandmother and then my mom. So, yeah.
So talk to me about the impact it had on you when your grandfather was no longer in your life as an 8-year-old boy.
It was very impactful. So my grandfather was in a season of life where he approached his relationship with me as the most important part of his life. I was the apple of his eye. My most fond. Yeah. I was the most. When I look back on it, Keisha, it's so much deeper than even just like a spoiled. Like, we went fishing every day except Sunday. We spent quality time, and if you think about love languages, like, I knew I was loved because of time. My most special memory of a birthday was, he went and got cookies and ice cream, and we sat together and talked, and that's one of my fondest birthday memories. Didn't have any money for elaborate gifts. It was just fishing and spent time with each other, and we raced to watch cartoons on Saturday mornings, and he raced me to get up in the mornings to open gifts for Christmas. I mean, he was just a wonderful man. And when he died, and unfortunately I found him, he had passed away picking me up from school. And I think that death was very impactful, but he had laid an imprint as a man on my life where I really think it helped me to aspire to be that kind of man, to be a man that really enjoys quality time with my children and my family.
I never knew that. So I thank you for sharing that with me, because that's something that marks your life and stays with you wherever you are. And especially not only that you found him, which I'm sorry to hear that, but what's the greater impression, as you said, is that quality time is something that really can never be replaced. It's lasting memories, and it shapes you. As you said, it made you want to aspire to be the type of man that would invest quality time. And I've seen that as you now have your own family. So give us the quick rundown of the personalities of your children. Tell me from the oldest to the youngest, who are Courtney's children?
Absolutely. So I'm blessed to have 4 children. I have a son. His name is Blair Elijah Walker. He is the quintessential all-American boy. And then I have 3 beautiful girls. My first daughter is Ava. Ava's my oldest daughter. She's Ava Grace Walker. And then Sloan, she's the quintessential middle daughter. And then the baby's McKenna, and we call her Tedder Club Up.
That's wonderful. Now, so I have a really wonderful memory of being in your home when I was there last year. Tell me what your wife did and put over your mantle on your wall, that display over, I think it's the fireplace. No.
Yes.
That's a portrait, but you know what I'm talking about. That's a portrait, right? That's beautiful.
She actually put this portrait over our mantle. And this was a portrait of our family. We actually won it as a gift. And this is my wife, Jocelyn. And that's Blair, my son, and Ava, and Sloan, and McKenna. And they're all 2 years apart. And she actually won it in a contest And we actually went and took the photos, and they gave us a portrait, and we actually were able to put it on the wall. But for someone who came single parent household, predominantly only child, I really believe giving my life to Christ in college inclined me to want God's best, and that was to really be to have a family, to raise a family, and to set them on the course for fulfilling their purpose. And so that's the way we approach it and think of it.
So what do you have symbolically in your home that speaks to that? I'm really talking about what your wife brought there. She brought some things.
Oh, yeah.
Listen, I want you to give me a picture. Yes, I had a picture when I was in your home, but I got to get another picture of that so we can show everybody, because I thought as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh my gosh, that's so cool.
Right. Okay, yeah. So my wife, we actually put 4 arrows on the wall. And so so the Bible talks about a man's quiver being blessed, that he has a quiver full of arrows, and that's his children. And we live in a time where children are viewed as a liability, but not as an asset, and not as a valuable, as a valuable commodity that you have. And I think from a biblical perspective, the most valuable thing that we have is our children, because each one of those children create an image and likeness of God, has the potential to do great things. And so the first arrow is Blair, represents Blair, and I think it's a silver one. And then we have 3 gold ones, and they represent all the girls. And so I've made sure that they know that no arrow is more important than the other. Blair's is in the front because he's the oldest. Ava's is on top, Sloan's is in the middle, and then McKenna's is on the bottom. But each one of them, we believe that God has given us the responsibility to raise those kids, to fashion them as you would an arrow. And if you've ever watched an arrow being made, it's a long, laborious, tedious process. You have to create the shaft, and you have to find the rock that create the blade in the front of an arrow, and then the feathers to be able to take care of direction and where it goes. And we see raising our kids as fashioning arrows. And so we have the arrows on the wall representing all 4 of them. And it's a wonderful symbol to us of the privilege that we have of preparing them. And at some point, we're going to be able to shoot them out. And so right now we're fashioning them. We're ironing out some of those things. We're trying to iron them out, It's so funny. I tell my son all the time, hey, when I tell you to take the trash out and be consistent, that's like your first job. If you're inconsistent with this, then when you have a job and you're told to do something consistently, it'll be an issue. So to be faithful to this, and then you'll be faithful to your work one day when it means something to your family's well-being and livelihood. And the same for the girl.
That's good. Now, you used a word, and I know what you mean, but because we're in this social media age, and things can be misconstrued, I know that you see children as a blessing, and a commodity almost objectifies them. Mm-hmm. So I know you're not speaking of them as objects that are not with their own personality and feeling and purpose. But I just wanted to clarify that, because I know your heart, but I know that there are people who will listen to this and think, oh, man, these are not little robots or whatever. No, they are very precious people that you take the time to get to know each one. Now, you mentioned something about being from a single parent household. You were raised by your grandfather at first, then he passed, and then you were spending a lot of time with your grandmother. What was the shift in you that gave you the inspiration, the determination to say that I want to be this type of father?
Great question. I think giving my life to Christ when I was in college, when I was 18 years old, I think that was that was the foundation of really sort of solidifying, okay, what am I going to become? What am I going to be? Mm-hmm. And I think God had to really set me at a place where, hey, you need to get serious about who I've made you to be. And once I really got serious about my purpose, my salvation, knowing him and understanding, what he had in store for my life, I wanted what he wanted for me. And the Bible speaks about, being fruitful and multiplying. I knew I wanted to be married. I wanted to be a husband. And so when the Lord blessed me to find my wife, I found a good thing and obtained his favor from the Lord. Then the process of being fruitful and multiply started. So I think for me, I always knew when I was a kid that I wanted a family. I come from a very big family. My mother was one of 9 children. And I was one of 76 grandchildren of my grandparents. So 76, I was one of 76 of us. I have, aunts. I had an uncle with 16 kids, another two uncles that had about 8 kids apiece. So, we come from a very big family. So family is really, really important. But the context of being from a single parent household, I really wanted a family for the glory of God, because I didn't want to I wanted to establish something, from our name, from my family, that would establish a legacy that would go on. And so for me, I just always wanted that, I felt like it was God's best, and to have children, to your earlier point, is more so the asset of having kids. And really the reason I said asset too, in addition, is because, again, we live in a society that doesn't always view children as an asset. They
It's a
view
blessing. They're a blessing from the Lord. A blessing.
Blessing from the Lord. And that's
I know you're hard, because your terms sound like capitalistic terms, but what you're saying is that they're a blessing. They're a benefit to us. Their life is valuable in the sense of having purpose. So let me ask you this, because I want to speak specifically now and talk a little bit about, we've had some discussions about what it means. You, as a young man, early in your life, in college, decided to make God's way your way, to become a Jesus follower. And there were some things that you had to let go and do differently. And then to really focus on, well, I want to have a family one day. I really want to do this thing in a way that will honor God and glorify God. But you didn't have someone in your home other than the first 8 years with your grandfather. So how did you learn to make some new decisions? And then after you answer that, I want to talk about, what did that mean for changing the dynamics and how you related to women?
It's funny, even though I didn't have the quintessential nuclear family, God put in my life in 1988 a man by the name of James Huckabee. And Mr. Huckabee became like a surrogate father. He was a gentleman in the community that actually, my mother and I had a blowout on the highway in 1988 on the road. I was actually visiting. It was right before I moved to Texas full time. And this gentleman stopped and helped us on the road, my mom and I. And he was very sincere, and he helped us, change a tire. Well, that man became like a surrogate father. And he was Mr. James Huckabee, had a wife, had 2 boys. And everything their family did, he included me. And I watched how he treated his wife. I watched how he paid bills. I watched how he worked a job. And to this day, that man, I send him a Happy Father's Day card every year, because he was a man that the Lord used to show me an example of what a man really is and what a father really is. And so the Lord, in his grace, allowed me to see that, to see consistency, to see faithfulness. And that man is still married to the same woman and still has 2 sons, and still excellent in all that he does. And this is 30 years later. And so God, in his grace, he will fill in the gaps for what we lack.
That's right.
And so he filled in the gaps for me and kind of gave me something to aspire to, when it comes to his absolute best. And so it made me want to be consistent, as I saw Mr. Huckabee was consistent.
So tell me then, how did that change? Because you saw this man then being faithful to his wife, having a good family, all of that. How did that impact you for what you instill in your girls? And I really want to turn this, talk specifically about how you see your role in helping to shape these beautiful arrows, these strong girls that will launch out one day soon.
Right. So it's so funny. I knew I was going to have more girls than boys. And I had asked the Lord specifically, this true story. I said, Lord, if you bless me with a son first, bless me with a son first. So I might raise him in the fear and admonition of you, and then he'll help me with these girls, And it's so funny. It's very much so like that. So my son, Blair, my son who, phenomenal. He's so much like me, and he's like his mom in a lot of ways too, but he's very much so like me, and he's very gregarious and very outgoing. And then the Lord just blessed us with three daughters back to back, one, two, three. And so very uniquely, I think because, I had such a great relationship with my grandmother and my mom, and then the ladies of my life in college. And like, it was very second nature for me to have girls. And so in regards to raising them, I have a conviction to raise them to know. One of my favorite authors, John Eldridge, he and his wife, John Eldridge, wrote a book, Wild at Heart, which I recommend for every young male. But his wife wrote a book called Captivating, where it's about, the desire of every girl's heart is to know that there's something lovely about her and something desirable about her, something special about her, and so for me, I want my girls to know they're special, that there's a call of God and a plan of God in their lives. I don't think it's just our responsibility to make sure that they grow up to go to college and get a good job. But also I want them to think of being wives and mothers, and so we actually encourage them, and we pray for our kids deliberately. We pray for their spouses. I pray for my son's wife, and I pray for all three of my girls' husbands one day, and that God would begin even now to prepare them for those roles in life. So for me, knowing that they're special, knowing that they're loved, knowing that there's limitless, there's no limit to what God can do in their life, what they can accomplish, what they can achieve, and at the same time aspire to be wives and moms, I think is a part of the quintessential responsibility. And for me as a dad, to just learn patience through the process of their development. There's sometimes when, I could come down hard and the Lord is like, you know what, ease up this time, give grace. And I tell him, sweetheart, I'm giving grace this time. You were asked to do something, you didn't do it, but I'm showing you grace right now, and this needs to be fixed. You got to get better. And then sometimes it's just to hear their hearts about how they feel about things. And so it's a wonderful journey. I am in the season where I believe parenting is less physical and more mental, emotional, spiritual now. And so it's, when you first have kids, it's all physical. You're just expending energy, picking and lifting and car seats and all this. But now it's more of a mental, emotional, spiritual component that you're trying to get just right in the raising of our kids.
So how did you shift? What have you found to help you in that shift to get to the more spiritual, mental, emotional space that you need and energy that you need to be fully invested in helping girls,
for
women?
Yeah, for me, being a husband to my wife, and really understanding that we think very differently. There's a way in which I think that is quintessentially different from the way my wife thinks. And in loving her, the process of understanding, the Bible says, dwell with your wife with understanding, and in understanding her, doesn't mean I always agree, but it's just understanding what's important to her, not making light of it, but understanding and trying to make sure that I am sensitive to her needs. And that's the same way I transition with the girls, to understand that each one of those girls are different. They're constructed different. Their emotions are different. Their makeup is different. My daughter Ava, she's a little bit more, self-reliant, and so I have to make sure she's not so just she can be hard on herself. And how do I encourage her? My daughter Sloan can be, her contentment with where she is, because she's the middle girl, making sure she knows she's valuable where she is so very important, and that she matters, her opinion matters, her thoughts matter. She's loved. And then the baby, she's such a very confident and fearless person, but she's also very sensitive. If you get on her about anything, she just breaks down. So I think it's just the process of studying and understanding and knowing. It's so funny, when I talked to my father-in-law prior to marrying my wife, he told me some very key things about my wife that really have helped me in being married to her. And I think that's because he was a dad that paid attention, spent that quality time, and he knew her. And so it helped me as a husband to kind of know, hey, this is information that her dad told me all these years ago, 16 years ago now. and I can understand her better. So I feel like I have that same responsibility to understand my daughters, so that one day when it's time for them to get married, I can share information and say, hey, if she does this, it's not the end of the world. That's just how she processes information. It takes her a while, just don't trip. She's okay. And I think that is important to making sure that my girls are thoroughly loved and cared for in a way that matters to them and will reinforce their identities for who they're going to be in the world and for the people who are going to come into their lives.
Now, you mentioned earlier that you want them to be open and you intentionally pray for them to be married and to think about being married. It's not a bad thing, because our culture, really, we have a lot of people, even in the body of Christ, who question the value and the validity of marriage now. It's almost like, do you need to do that, whatever, or girl power. And I'm all for that. So, I really am all the way for that. But I also know that there's a way that girls have to be raised to know it's okay to be strong. It is okay to have aspirations and goals. How do you balance that? And I'm asking the question because I feel like sometimes, girls can be made to either focus only on their looks and exterior. Their value comes from how they look, that you have all of that on the Instagram model feeds, right? You have all of this. Or you have the other extreme. If they're really smart, sometimes they're not made to feel like who they are and how they present themselves matters as much. And all of that is a part of who we are. As a dad, how do you help them become more confident and have that balance in all the areas?
I think balance is so very important. One of my favorite scriptures, obviously, when it comes to girl, is charm is deceitful, beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord, she shall be praised. I think that really puts into, from a biblical standard, the balance that's needed. Like, you can be charming, you can be very beautiful on the outside, but man, like the substance, what I found out when I went to college was that there were young ladies who loved the Lord. And for me, that was what was beautiful. That was beautiful to see a young lady who loved God, who loved the Lord. And so that's important to me. I think the balance, I do think that we're in a time now where women have received a lot of encouragement. And I think that that's been necessary, because certainly I will be very honest. I do think that we're in a crisis where boys are concerned right now. And the numbers show that. We're in a significant crisis from a boy perspective. And I have definitely a passion for that. Because it's totally flipped in a sense. There's continued work that needs to be done with making sure that girls are encouraged and uplifted, but it shouldn't happen at the expense now of boys now kind of just being kind of left behind. Because again, and you're talking about marriage, but now you got 70% of our colleges are female, 80 to 90% of our prison systems are boys, and that's across all cultures. And so we do have a flip flop. We do have an imbalance that's there right now. So what we have to do is we have a balanced message that women, young girls know you are valuable. You can do whatever God puts in your heart. I tell my children, whatever God puts in your heart to do, you can do. Whatever he puts in your heart to become, you can become. He will give you the resources. He will supply what you need to become what he's called you to become. And that is something that I want each one of our kids to know and realize that within themselves, that there's something in them that we want to, as parents, come alongside them to help to come out. And so, but I love the fact that you said balance. I want them to know that they're valuable and important, but not at the expense of their brother. Or I want them to see young men as valuable. I want my son, I'm always on him by how he treats them. I'm always on him about the standard. You don't do that. You don't wrestle them. You don't throw your sister on the bed. You don't, oh gosh, every other day, but I'm also on the girls not to mistreat him, because they can be very, yeah, them girls can be a little aggressive with him sometimes. And he's like screaming, because, there's been a foot on his neck or something like that. So it balance is so very key. But again, the principle is a woman that fears the Lord. And I came from, my grandmother feared the Lord. She was the quintessential example of a woman who feared the Lord. And there's no person that I consider greater, in my life, than her. She was number one. And it was because of that she stands out so much in my heart and my mind.
So, and I appreciate that you say that, but I guess I want to push you to think about what happens for girls. And obviously you have already established a standard in your home and your girls are covered for real. But what happens for young ladies who don't have that covering in their home from a father who can speak to them and nurture them in that way? And so really, I hear what you're saying, but I don't really see it around me, or let's just speak to, and I'm sure you have some brothers, you have to know some brothers who may be single fathers and they're not in the home with their children, but how might you suggest that they make sure that they fill in the gaps and still convey to their daughters what is necessary for them to grow up and be very secure?
I think that we have to do a better job from a community standpoint to love on these kids who don't have the dads, who don't have the quintessential nuclear family. Like Mr. Huckabee found me in 1988 and just encouraged my identity, encouraged my manhood, included me in his family, covered me. We need to do the same thing, because there's a slew of young ladies out there that need to know that there's a call of God in their life, that they're created in the image and likeness of a holy God, and that he loves them and has a plan and a purpose. And they're not defined by what their body looks like exclusively. They're not defined by their situation or circumstance. So we need more surrogate parents who come alongside to help to encourage, if it's a single parent mom, if it's a single parent father who has a daughter, or how can we encourage them and uplift them? And I have friends that have kids that we do specific things to encourage their children. We actually had a family member who had a son who was in a crisis and actually had to go to a hospital, and his mom contacted me and said that he was asked to reach out to two people outside of his home. And I was one of them, that he wanted to spend time with Mr. Courtney and the pastor of our church. How can we fill in the gaps to come alongside of these families to affirm the identities of these young ladies? Because you're right, there's a slew of young ladies out there that don't have what my daughters have. But you know what? And it may be somebody in the camera right now. Hey, if you know a young lady who doesn't have a father, and you have an opportunity to affirm her identity, the reason that we have those arrows on the wall is that and the reason why the greatest asset, if you will, is our children, is because the blessing of children is that it's so much that they can do for the glory of God. They're a life. I think about, I grew up in a town of 300 people. I was, 300 folks, and have been all over the world, and never had a thought of what God was going to do, but he's done unbelievable things. And the same thing can happen in the lives of so many of these young people if we instill confidence and value in them.
I believe that. I really do. I believe it completely. I know that it's important for you. You're a very focused man. You're very, very intentional. You drill down into your children. I've heard how you pull them all together and sit them down. They hear the same thing over and over. You get it into them. You want them to really get it. Before we turn the page and kind of wrap up this talk, I guess I want to hear from your heart about what you'd like to see with more young women. There really has been a slew of women, and to use your word, there's been a slew of women, young women, the suicide, so many are being trafficked. There are a lot of crimes against, we women, even when into our adulthood, we still don't make quite as much as men. And so that's why you have something like Women's History Month to just affirm and bring the value and make sure that women who have always been in the back or treated as less than get the attention and the respect that they need. How have you just helped yourself get educated, but then also thinking about the future? What would you like to see for more young women, and what advice would you give to parents and especially to girl dads?
That's such a really, really good question. I think, unfortunately, we live in a time of the objectification of so many women, physical objectification,
Yeah.
that has led to the trafficking issue being what it is. And it's because we have so many men who are out of place, men who don't know their identity, don't know who they are. We were created as men to cover. We were created to be protectors and coverers of our wives and of our kids, and also covering in the community as well. It was intended that men were the protectors of women and children. And unfortunately, we live in a time now where there's an objectification of both women and children. And so we need men, number one, to stand up to say, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to become a man going his own way. There's organizations now, men going their own way because of their own frustrations, but it's because I think that they don't have a great grasp of their identity and who they are and what they were intended to be. We were intended to cover and to realize women as a weaker vessel is not necessarily saying less than, but it's saying different in construction. The construction is different, and in the
Now,
different construction, I am to come alongside to affirm the identity, to protect the weaker part of it, but at the same time, affirm the identity. And we need more men to affirm the identity of women and understand it doesn't make me less than to affirm her identity and to prop her up. Because when I do that, then it helps her to shine and to know who she is. Speaking on that depression, you're seeing a lot of that. Obviously, Miss USA that happened in the former Miss USA that was in New York City and New York State that happened about a month ago, and very tragic. And hey, spiritually, I do believe that we have an enemy of our souls that comes to steal, kill, and to destroy. And Jesus said, "I've come today might have life and have it more abundantly." I think when you understand life and what that means, the Zoe kind of life where you see God's provision and to see him do limitless, unbelievable things in your life. We have too many people that it's so very easy. I believe Satan's thing is to get you to looking within and look at what you're lacking and what you don't have. And when you don't have affirmation, you don't have encouragement, you don't have anyone that affirms your identity, that is what opens the door for so many of these negative thoughts to come in. So we as men, number one, have to do a better job. Women have to do a better job. Some of the older ladies are affirming the identities of these young ladies. And that's a big thing for me. I think that we are missing it, especially in the United States of America right now in regards to discipleship, apprenticeship, and really just speaking to the older, speaking to the younger generation in a spirit of affirmation to affirm the identities.
yeah,
Affirmation is basically saying what you already know, but saying it over and over again. Like, I believe in you. I see you. You're doing. And I remember growing up with people who did that, who would
yeah,
affirm identities. And it just says, hey, you're valuable. Do you know that there's greatness? But we live in such a time now where this whole hater concept and, you don't want people to get the big head, but somebody just needs a word of encouragement and upliftment. So my
yeah.
prayer is that women would know who they are, that we would affirm the identities of these young ladies, that we would start to protect the women that are around us, to let them know that they're valuable, and that we're not. And if you know of injustice happening where women are concerned, say something, do something.
Yeah.
The city of Cleveland, where my wife is from, a man named Charles, uh, was walking down the street and he heard a young lady crying out for help, and come to find out that she had been trapped in a house
Oh, I
for
remember that.
for,
Yes.
for 12 years, had
Yeah.
been held hostage. And it was a brother with long hair named Charles. And we all joke around about how Charles was looking. He talking about, all the things that Charles said. But Charles, he did something. He went and pulled that girl to safety. He said,
Yeah.
and it was because he was paying attention.
Yeah.
And we just need to open our eyes to what's around us, because you never know what's going on. Those
Right.
girls would never been found if it weren't for a man paying attention, and that's what we need more of.
Now, I was gonna try to wind us up here, but you started going down a path, and for the sake of a very broad audience, because I feel like the more we get educated and the broader we look into what the word says, and we get more light in the varying ways that the scriptures are interpreted, because you have
Yeah,
a very strong patriarchal background. You have a
yeah,
very strong patriarchal theological bent. And I know that there are some spaces that, and I've even talked to them because I have a not as strong as you, actually not very much at all. So because I believe so much in how, as a woman who was raised first in my parents were together, but then after they split, I just saw such great covering, if you will, in community, but also in the very nature of my personal relationship with God. And so
Mm-hmm.
even when you don't have that physical presence, there's something so valuable in knowing who you are at the
Yeah.
core,
Yeah.
and not having a sense that there is a lacking. And I guess that's probably why the relationships that I have with my brothers and the men's ministry developed to be right, because but we shared a lot. And you said even earlier in one of our other conversations that it was mutual. You know, you gained
Yeah.
something from it, and I gained something from it. And so I love how, you know, I think of scripture in the fact that how God gave them dominion, and where there
Yeah.
is a
Yeah.
place for both male and female to see the fullness of who they are as an expression of God's image, and how when that comes together, both are necessary to, whether they are married in a family or even if it's a single family home. Even as you said, what's the gentleman's name that came to help you and your mother?
James Huckabee.
Mr. Huckabee. Mr.
Yeah.
Huckabee came and supplied something, as we've been talking over and over about
Mm-hmm.
filling in the gaps. And I guess I want to make sure we really just push that out, because I think there are a lot of girls, and since this is about raising girls and being girls dad, there are a lot of girls
Absolutely.
who would miss what your girls have the benefit of, but they don't have to feel that they are lacking if they don't have what we traditionally call, in a more patriarchal setup, as covering, because I know that there is a way that God can fill the gap and really make a difference such that they can still be strong and supported. And I love that you have highlighted so much that you've instilled in your girls, even when someone could possibly say you were lacking, but again, God filled the gap. You have this
Yeah.
presence.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was a beautiful thing. I really
Mm-hmm.
appreciate you sharing all of this. This is, it's a good conversation I think we need to have more of. And I think it helps those who are raising children, even if the children are 20, 22 and older. I think about my niece, whom you know, and my
Oh
nephew.
yeah.
I love that I get to watch them grow up, but I really hope and pray that more people have conversations like this and think with a prayerful spirit and are intentional about how we help the next generation look at
Yeah.
family, look at marriage, look at their roles, or else we won't have anything. And the whole family structure we know is changing, and some people would say falling apart. But as long as we can really pull back, like it's almost like gathering people back to center, you know, pull them back to center and model the good things that we know work, and then validate what God has already put in women and in men to come together to represent the fullness of the God image. I think that's going to be awesome to help young people turn a little bit. And I think they're hungry for it, to be honest.
Pastor Tony Evans always talks here in Dallas at Oak Cliff Bible Fellowship. He always talks about any community is only strong as the individual families they're in, right? The individual families help to build up a community, right? And so the thing is, you have to have, but the community can't be just focus inward. If you're only focused inward, then that's great for you. That's great for your home. But if I don't have an opportunity to encourage my son's teammates or my daughter's teammates, or if I see a young lady that needs encouragement, one of the things that they always joke with me when I go up to the school, I speak to all the kids. I speak to the girl. Hey, Paige, how you doing? Hey.
So you're that dad that everybody
I,
is going to know.
I am. I'm that dude, because I want them to know they matter and that they're important. And that, even though there's this, oh gosh, this image of coolness now where people don't want to say hi and speak. I don't care nothing about that. It's affirming their identities. It's affirming them.
Their
Say, hey,
personhood, just acknowledging you as person. And
yes, yes.
you matter, you as person, and bearing the image of God, you matter, you person.
And that
Some of that's
community,
also your country upbringing too, because
that's right. That's right. But you know what though? That's community.
Yes,
That's
it is.
community. And what we don't do now is live in community, because with community, there's accountability. There is all of these illities, right, that come along with people coming together. We have a sermon series right now in our church, and it's about the circle. It's about life was intended to be lived in circles instead of rows and columns. That many people live life in rows, but really God intended that we live life in circles, and that's where community functions the best in, where we function together, seeing each other face to face, being in each other's lives. And so I think that that's what this is about. And to your earlier point, I want to be a man that does affirm the identities. Keisha, I remember in college, the Lord said, I want you to be a man that if I set you on an airplane next to Halle Berry, could you encourage her and not lust after her? Could you minister to her and not lust her? And I was like, man, that's deep, because that was getting me in the realm of thought of never objectify when she's created in the image and likeness of a holy God and has a purpose and a calling. And you have an opportunity maybe to be a brother to her. And I think the men's ministry was about that, a trusted environment where someone is not trying to take from you, but actually trying to give back. And that's what we have to do more of.
I hope and I pray that your daughters have the benefit. Not only, I know they're blessed to have you as a dad and Blair as a big brother, but they also learn to enjoy the blessing of a men's ministry, their own type. I'm speaking it over them. Whatever they get off and they go to college and whatever they do in life.
I'm gonna know who the men's ministry is.
That's fine. That's good. You should. But the point is, it'll bless their lives, because there's something that we all need from one another. And I think God just created it that way. I have enjoyed this conversation. It's always good to catch up with you. And I appreciate that you are doing such a great job to encourage others, affirm others, especially the next generation, and even more so, the girls. And I am all for lifting up my brothers, which is why I'm doing this series. We want to hear from the other side. We want to talk. And a lot of times people say, well, men don't talk enough, or what is their opinion? Or I'm trying to encourage some ladies to listen in as well, because I know that if you are married to a dude that doesn't talk that much, or if you are dating someone that doesn't talk that much, or if you are with someone who's very communicative, but you've not had these types of conversations to discuss, how would you want to raise your children? What do they believe about raising girls and boys and the difference thereof? Or what do they even believe about their own way to model what your children should look for? Because that's what you're doing as well. You set the standard for what your daughters will expect. So this has been so rich. I appreciate the time. Listen, I hope we get to connect again, and I'm sure there'll be something else on the radar that we can talk about, because there's always something. And you, my brother, are one of my favorites to hear your opinion, your perspective from the other side. Thank you so much for being with me. I appreciate it. Well, as always, I am grateful for anyone who gives me their time and their opinion and the energy it takes to have a conversation that I'm praying will help you. And if not you, you can pass it along. Remember, you should definitely subscribe, like, and share. Make sure that you stay tuned, get connected, find out more about what you can do to be an encouragement to someone in your community, in your sphere of influence. Drop a comment, leave a note, leave us some ideas of ways that you are empowering young girls, helping them to see their best, their fullest potential, and then also modeling that, whether you are a man or a woman. We need each other, and there is always something we can learn together. Well, I appreciate again my brother, Dr. Courtney Walker, sharing with me. And until we get together the next time, who knows what the topic will be? I just trust that it will be another great male perspective from the other side. This is Intensified Life TV with Dr. Lakeisha B.